Hello everybody, and time for another album review, and this is an album review from an album that came out about 4 months ago in the early portions of June. It's the new album from Vader called Tibi et Igni, which is a Latin phrase for you and fire. So that is the album title, and so let's get into the review, shall we? But before we get into it, brief history on Vader. Vader is a Polish heavy metal band that formed in 1983, and Vader's been mostly known as a death metal band, and they started the same year as the death metal pioneers like Possessed and Death, particularly Death. Possessed, I feel, is more of a brutal thrash band, personally, but Vader started around that same time, but they weren't playing death metal in the beginning. They were playing more of a mixture of traditional metal and speed metal, kind of like Judas Priest on Painkiller kind of vibe. But then they migrated more into thrash metal during the mid-'80s, and then in the late '80s, that's when they became a death metal band with their demo Necrolust. But they didn't put an album out until around 92 or 93, and they've gotten a big reputation as a raucous and a very brutal death metal band from Europe and Poland. Other Polish metal band, the only other Polish metal band I could think of is Behemoth. But Vader was always one of those very fast and aggressive death metal bands where their blast beats are super fast, and they play their style much in a thrash metal tempo with some death metal structures in there. And they did a covers album in '96 that had some killer covers, like them covering Slayer and Terrorizer, Black Sabbath, so many others, Possessed, so many bands that influenced them they did covers of. And they have just evolved their style over the years, and now we get to this album. And now we get into the review. So with this album, it was a 10-track affair, a little over 40 minutes. First of all, right off the gate, the first 2 tracks knocked me on my ass. The songs Go to Hell and Where Angels Weep. Those were tracks that just like, whoa. Like, they went by so quick, it was shocking. Like, it was so fast and so heavy, but very, very intricate too. Like, it was very technical based. Those tracks were just unbelievable. Particularly the song Where Angels Weep. It was just so fast. And in fact, it was the shortest song on the album at a little bit over 2 minutes. With Go to Hell, it was about nearly a 3-minute track. And that was the third shortest song on the album, with the second shortest being a song later on, Abandon All Hope. But with those 2 tracks, it just blew me away. And then when I looked at the track list, I saw the song Triumph of Death, and immediately I thought Vader's probably going to do a cover of the Hellhammer song, Triumph of Death. But when I listened to it, it didn't even touch it, and it wasn't even a cover. It was an original song, and wow, it was an incredible track. It was actually one of my personal favorites on the album. Same goes for the next song, Hexenkessel. Hexenkessel just has this really cool symphonic charm, a symphonic sound that happens in the background on parts of the song that gave it a nice touch with the heaviness and the fast speeds and the aggression that goes along with it. The song Worms of Eden was a pretty good track, but that song was just a little bit too simplistic. But usually simplicity ain't always a bad thing. It's just whenever you hear a band like Vader, you expect fast songs that are aggressive. This song was a little bit more on the simple side of things, but it was still a pretty good track. The Eye of the Abyss, longest song, nearly 7 minutes. Phenomenal track. This song was excellent. Very well put together with that near 2-minute introduction with the symphonic elements going on. It just made it for an incredible atmosphere to go into what was to come on that track, and boy, that track was just rip-roaring through the riffs, the solos, the drums were just so crazy, to the point where that track would have been a contender for Song of the Year, but like I said, I'm not doing that kind of list for my videos. I particularly do albums. If I was to try to do songs, it'd be very, very tough. Tough enough as it is trying to do albums. But the closer track, The End, was a really good track, but that track kind of had a little bit of a groove metal influence, kind of like from like Pantera or Machine Head or something like that. And I thought it was a really good way to close the album out, but it just wasn't one of those songs that wasn't particularly a favorite. But overall with this album, the production was really good for a very raw and aggressive band. The production for it was perfect for me. Well, I guess I shouldn't say perfect. It was solid, like for a band who wants to sound raw but at the same time have like a relevant sound to it. It was a perfect mix. I really, really liked how the production came about on this album. The guitar riffs and the solos were just killer. The drums, fast blast beats, and that's what I like. I like hearing that kind of stuff within extreme metal, and it blew me away. Peter's vocals still haven't missed a beat, and the lyrics and song titles were pretty interesting, pretty brutal, and pretty evil. To the point where this album, to me, with the sound and the lyrics, and I read it in a review and I couldn't agree more, it has that influence from two bands in particular where they combine the influences but turn it into their own style. They took influences from Slayer and Morbid Angel. And those are two legendary metal bands right there. So it definitely shows that more bands are going into an old school style route by taking reference from bands in the 80s, that in the late 80s, early 90s, that had the extreme variety and were able to kick ass with it. Slayer definitely did throughout the entire decade of the 80s. Morbid Angel did really well from the late 80s to the mid 90s for me personally. And Peter's voice kind of does reminisce David Vincent's voice during the Domination era in '95. It kind of reminisced that to me. And the way the songs and the solos were constructed, it was pretty much, I would say, a very interesting Slayer influence on it. But overall, this was a really, really good album. 8.5 out of 10. There were no songs I really found to be terrible whatsoever. Some songs like Armada on Fire, Abandon All Hope, Worms of Eden, and Light Reaper, those were tracks I didn't really talk about because they didn't really hit me too hard. But that's a minor complaint. Very minor, too. This is a hell of a death metal disc. Is it the best death metal disc to come out this year? No. I still feel Cannibal Corpse was the best, but it's up there. But this was a really good release. 8.5 out of 10, I think, is a fair score. But anyways, thank you guys for watching this review. The next review I do plan on doing the review of the new Behemoth album, The Satanist. And that album was early in the year in February. And it's an important album because it was 5 years of waiting after their singer Nergal had surgery and stuff, but we'll talk more on that in the review. But anyways,